All right, hello everybody, and welcome to When the Village Works Together, Family Engagement Fueled by Interactions. I'm Isabella, I'm here from Teachstone to get us started today with this awesome presentation with Dr. Johira Buza and Erin Sabina, who you probably know from other Teachstone webinars and demos. Before we get started, just a reminder that we are going to be recording today, so if you have to jump out early for any reason, there will be a recording, so no fears, not to fret. We'll send you the email with the slides, the recording, the resources that we mentioned in today's presentation. So you'll have everything you need from today going forward. The chat box is on. So I'm already seeing some people introducing themselves in the chat. Welcome. Thank you. Feel free to let us know where you're signing in from. And we also have the Q&A box open. So if you have any questions for either Johira or Erin today, we definitely recommend using that Q&A box just as an easier way for us to see those questions. But of course, the chat is also open. And we're excited to get to those questions during today's presentation. We want it to be as interactive as possible, given the Zoom platform. So today we're going to be looking at interactions and creating that bridge between home and school and what that could look like in your program. And of course, we want to hear what that already looks like. We'll talk about some ideas for supporting family engagement, including just what family engagement looks like and some different ways of maybe thinking about it. That's just equitable and really make sure that our staff as educators and families are really feel on the same team when supporting children. And then we're going to chat about what family engagement workshops may look like in your program. Teachstone has quite a few options for you, and we're excited to chat about that. So now I'm going to pass it over to Erin Sabina, our regional director, and Johira Buza to chat about themselves and get this presentation started. So we're excited to have you all.
Thanks, Isabella. So I'm Erin Sabina. I've been with Teachstone almost coming up on my 8-year anniversary right now. I also have a couple kids, so family engagement is something a little bit near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited for this conversation here and excited for Johira to be joining me, if you can introduce yourself as well. And I see some people in the chat saying where they're from. Let me add that real quick. I just relocated from Virginia to Denver, so I saw some Colorado folks in here as well. So I support the western portion of the country. Johira?
Hi, my name is Dr. Johira Boza, and family engagement is near and dear to me as well. I was a child of immigrant families from Cuba, and honestly, if it wasn't for the amazing educators that I had when we got to this country that really engaged my family in understanding the education system and supporting them in understanding how to support me, I would not be where I am today. So I'm very grateful for all those amazing educators that have lent out their hands to families like mine. And I'm really excited to be here today. I'm living in Miami-Dade County. If any of you are familiar with the area, I see some of you are already on the chat. I'm from the Hialeah portion, which has like a very strong immigrant community that really needs a lot of support in understanding our education system for their children to be successful. So I'm excited to be here with you, Erin.
And I just saw somebody from Hawaii is joining us right now too. It's early there. Good morning, everyone. I'm still having my coffee out here in Colorado. So we're excited to talk about the importance of interactions, and we joke at Teachstone that interactions really, it goes so far beyond the classroom. So we're going to be talking about how interactions can really be the bridge between home and school. You talk about consistency of interactions. We talk about, when we think about classroom organization, we think about routine and structure. And how are we making sure that kids have the same routines throughout the entire day, both at home and at school? Um, so interactions, we know that they are a key driving factor. So we know that interactions among educators and students drive development, that they need to thrive in school and in life, but it's the how. So how are they delivering this information? How are they making the kids feel? And so this is not just between educators and kids, it's all adults and kids, and how are they interacting with one another? So when we think about the different domains of class, well, first, how many of you, I'm guessing that most of you are familiar with class. Is there anyone, if you're in the chat, if you're not as familiar with class? Because I'm not sure what kind of roles some of you folks have. If I know some of you, when I talk to different programs, family engagement folks aren't as familiar with what class is. So we're going to kind of dive into this a little bit as well. But when we think about what class is and these interactions that connect, we're going to be seeing different kind of behaviors. We're seeing greeting children by name at the door. That's connecting with them. That's letting these kids know, I see you. I'm here for you. Responding to them quickly, not just kind of letting them keep calling for you. Modeling that mindfulness and that self-regulation that we want the kids to be learning for themselves and being able to learn how to regulate their emotions and respond in different situations. So when we do these things, Jahira, what are some of the kind of benefits that we see if we're doing some of these behaviors with kids?
Yeah, so we know that when children are connecting with their educators and building those strong relationships, they start to perceive their classroom as a safe place to be. And so, as they start perceiving their classrooms as a safe place to be, they are able to explore more. And so, they're also able to use their frontal lobe more, right? Because they feel more at peace. And so, they're able to have higher executive functioning where they are kind of really practicing some of their inhibition, like my impulse control is better. We also see that those children that connect better with their educators, they're better able to have more language skills. So they're able to communicate better. They're also better able to support play in their classrooms with their peers. So we have children that can come in, that can have some appropriate play experiences without any of the biting or the hitting or not knowing how to interact. So these moments of connection that we are supporting between the educators and the children is really supporting children and having better social emotional skills, better cognitive skills, and better language skills. Oh, you're on mute, Aaron.
I got that alert as soon as I started talking. So we know that connection is so important. We want to be engaging as well. We want a classroom that looks like a well-oiled machine. And I know that that sounds, really like pie in the sky, but the more that we do some of these behaviors intentionally, the more we can have that well-oiled machine. Making the most out of transition times. So making sure that it's not just, you're moving on to the next activity, but do the kids know what they're expecting, what they're going to be doing when they transition from one activity to another? Do you have songs that they're singing? Are you still engaging during those times? Offering consistent and clear routines and with visual supports. I love that because I'm definitely a multimodality learner myself, making sure kids have these different supports so that they know what the routines are. You can point to them, reinforce them throughout the day. And as we have these interactions, what sorts of outcomes can we see those interactions driving, Jaira?
Yeah, one of the great things that we see when we have that well-oiled machine is that we have a huge decrease in behavior problems, right? So when children know what they're supposed to do, they know what the next steps are, they don't really have a lot of time to be hitting their friends, right? So we see a huge decrease in some of those behavior problems. And we also see that children have fewer conflicts with their educators. So if the children know what to do and they're being engaged in a way that's things are interesting for them, that they know what is happening next, that they are aware of what their expectations are. Oh, I'm supposed to be sitting here rolling this Play-Doh and making this snowman with my Play-Doh, then we don't see those behavior problems, and those challenging behaviors we know can be really hard on educators, and you already do so much. So by creating classrooms that are this well-oiled machine, we're reducing some of that workload on the educator.
I saw something recently that was about how toddlers are some of the most resilient people because imagine just being dragged from place to place, having no idea where you're going, what to expect, and they just roll with it. And then the more that we can create some of that acknowledgement of here's what the next step is, here's what we're going to be doing, the more that can help settle emotions and help them understand what to anticipate and regulate themselves a little bit. Um, I
And
love
Aaron, I love that you mentioned like toddlers. I had a teacher that I was working with once, and we were doing, I was her coach, and we were kind of walking through letting the children know what we were supposed to do with them before, right? So, like anticipating that child say, "Hey, I'm going to pick you up," or "I'm going to give you food." And that teacher made a really funny comment to me because she said, I realized that what I was doing before was like a T-Rex. I was like, the kids were playing and I was just like coming in and grabbing them in my mouth and picking them up. Like, no wonder they were crying. And I always think of that educator because I'm like, that's a great way to put it. That's what these little ones, these infants and toddlers are feeling, where we're just like moving them around and, putting them in different places without letting them know ahead of time. If we as adults were having someone look into our pants, we would probably feel pretty uncomfortable. So, letting them know before and having it be a smoother experience can really decrease a lot of those behavior problems.
exactly, yeah, it's like the claw machine, right? Just
Yeah.
picking them up and moving them.
Mhm.
Um, and then so, once we've now kind of set some of the emotional regulation, the expectations of behavior, we can really have those interactions that inspire the learning. So, are we introducing new vocabulary? Are we modeling language as we're communicating? Are we prompting critical thinking skills, having open-ended questions? And this is one I just did a presentation like 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that came up is that sort of rapid fire questions. Like I asked 5, 6 questions and I didn't get a good score in instructional support still. And it's not about how many questions, it's about the quality of those questions. Are you scaffolding the information? Are you really developing the concepts? And then lastly, are you helping children predict outcomes and analyzing that information? So are you just kind of saying when X happens, Y happens, or are you helping them learn that for themselves and seeing cause and effect and predicting what those possible outcomes are? So when we have those kinds of behaviors, what sort of outcomes are we going to see?
Yeah, we see children have those aha moments, right? And as adults, we know that as learners, that when we are learning something and we're like, oh, I just figured this things out myself. That's really solid learning for us. And so when we are having interactions like that, we see tremendous growth in children's language development. Some of this research has been done with dual language learners, and we see growth in both languages, which is interesting. We also see better literacy skills. So when we follow them over time, we see that these children are being better able to recognize those letters, sound those out, and they have a better potential to be able to learn how to read. We see that they're better at math, they're better at executive functioning skills as well. So this inspiring learning where we're asking the children to have the cognitive load, right? Like rather than just passively giving them the information, engage them in the thinking, have them think about, why did that block fall? How is it that I do this puzzle? What is it that I need to do? Like maybe I need to turn this piece, maybe I don't. But rather than just giving them the answer, engaging them in the learning is really cementing these really important outcomes for later development.
I love that. And so the consistency in those interactions is related to improved academic and social emotional outcomes. And I think that totally makes sense because if you understand what's expected and you're able to kind of just go with the flow. I joke about how I dress like a cartoon character, right? I wear like the same outfit every day, almost always a black V-neck. But that helps lighten my cognitive load in some ways of I don't need to burden myself with what am I going to wear today? Take some of those unnecessary things off of my plate so that I can focus on work. And it's similar here, like take some of those extraneous thoughts off of kids' plates and let them focus on what they are excited about. Let them focus on the academics that they're interested in, and having that consistency helps with that. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about that consistency that we can have from school to being at home as well. So you can partner with families to improve outcomes. Um, in partnering, one thing that we were discussing when we were kind of setting up for this webinar is that it's a dual partnership. It goes both ways. So how are you really setting up so that you're becoming the learner as well and not just the teacher?
And as we set up that consistency across the different settings, children are going to be able to be more successful, right? If in the classroom they know what they're expected to do and they're able to make some choices that empower them and make them feel confident, and they're being able to use all this language and get exposed to it. And that's happening in the home environment too. They're having opportunities to practice those really important skills across both contexts. And of course, maybe the choices that we give in the classroom might be a little bit different than the choices we give at home, but the strategy of interaction itself is very similar.
And we're partnering, we're all on the same team, right? We're all on the kids' team. So our goal is always to be supporting each and every child. So how do we make that team stronger? By supporting the families that are supporting the kids as well. Um, and so can you talk a little bit about funds of knowledge, Jahara?
Sure. So we know that families come in with a lot of really important strengths, right? They're already doing they have a lot of knowledge. So they have these funds of knowledge that we as educators want to tap into, right? What is it that they're already bringing? What is all this knowledge that they have that we can tap into to be able to build that stronger team? And one of the things I love that you said, Erin, is that we are a team, right? I think sometimes, as I'm working with educators, educators have so much on their plate, and they sometimes feel like it's really on them to make the children succeed. They have all this responsibility, and they're really, really invested in those kids. And I always tell them that if we really become a team with the families, it makes our job easier. If we tap into those funds of knowledge of the families and we capitalize on those things to be able to support children's skill, that isn't less of a workload for us. And of course, engaging with families we know can be challenging. We know that we need a lot of support as educators to be able to do that. Many of us, when we were studying to be educators, they taught us how to teach children language, how to teach children math, but they didn't really spend a lot of time teaching us how do we form great relationships with families to become that team. And so we hopefully with webinars like this are being able to provide some support for the educators to be able to do these things and build those teams to be stronger so we can capitalize on those funds of knowledge of things that are happening in the home environment.
I love that. And so as we're thinking about this, I would love if y'all can put in the chat here. I'm sure a lot of programs are already doing things that are embedding family engagement in your program. So if you can just kind of put in the chat what some examples are of ways that you're engaging with families within your program. Let's see. Wait a moment to see if we get some responses here. And I know at the same time, we also captured, we had posed this question in our class learning community, which plug for the class learning community. If you're not part of it, you should absolutely join it. It is a fantastic free resource to be able to connect with others. And so we posed this question in the class learning community, and we got some great responses. So I'm not going to read it to you, but one of these, so this one, verbally communicating with each parent, that verbal communication. But also think about what are other ways that parents communicate. So is it verbal communication? Do they prefer email? Do they prefer a newsletter? And having these different modalities. And so I love that and making sure that, so communication's key. Parents love to see what the kids are doing. So what are you doing that you are proud of? What are the kids doing that the kids are proud of that we can be sharing with the families? I see some chats coming in here now. Um, Ready Rosie, monthly newsletter, parent advisory committee, parent breakfasts, parent education, family projects, a home activity that requires both parent and child. I love that one. At home activities. Yeah, if you want to take this one.
I also see with the home activities, one of the things that I love is that we can incorporate in what families are already doing. Again, thinking about capitalizing on those funds of knowledge. So when we're thinking about some of these home activities, we can first understand what is it that the families are already doing with their kids, right? So sometimes families are talking to children about their day, or sometimes families are encouraging children to help them do something in the kitchen, make their own sandwiches and things like that. And we could think about how is it that we can provide and suggest experiences that are already building on that. So if you're already involving your child and helping you in the kitchen, just supporting the family and saying like, hey, what new language, what new vocabulary might we want to use in the kitchen? Maybe we want to label the different fruits and vegetables that we're cooking with, or we want to think about labeling the utensils. This is a knife and this is how you use it, and this is the fork. And we can support families in what they're already doing and having those experiences at home that builds on these interactions that support children's skills. I saw in the app some people were mentioning some of those different modalities that you were talking about, Erin. So like Learning Genie and the Class Dojo. We know that some families have really busy schedules. So taking opportunities to take a quick picture and of what the child is doing in the classroom. And I saw little Danny stacking some blocks today. He was really thinking about cause and effect. Having those moments of connections with the families can help support that strong bond between the educator and the family so we can work together.
Okay,
Oh,
so I see a bunch of chats that have come in the meantime. And yeah, so there's a lot of different modalities that are being discussed, as you were mentioning. So I'm seeing text, email, different apps, calendars, different activities going on. Um, and then, and we'll talk a little bit about this one. I do feel children match their parents' energy when it comes to learning. So reminding parents their views do pass to the kids and how they feel about putting in the effort. So we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment as well. All right, if we can go to the next slide. Head Start. We'll talk about Head Start and the importance of family engagement in a bit as well. Um, but so with that, they're sending home weekly notes, family events in the evening, family literacy. And that's one thing to think about as well is parent versus family, and that some of these kiddos are being raised not necessarily by a parent in the traditional sense, but by maybe aunts, by grandparents. And so thinking holistically about the entire family, even if they are living with parents, they might also have their grandparents and other folks living there. So how can we really engage the uniqueness of each family?
and Erin, I love that you mentioned that because I think is really important when we think about being inclusive to different cultures, right? So like I said, I'm from Cuban culture. My grandparents were involved in every single school event that I had. Like I remember when one of my teachers was like, but for parent teacher conference, like I really want to talk to mom and dad. And my grandma was like, no, I need to be there because I need to know, which ended up working out well. So as we think about family engagement and making it more general, some people were sharing in the chat already about grandparents day. I'm a godmother of two wonderful godchildren, and I go to every single school event that they have. And so thinking about incorporating more of that family and inviting them to be part of those can really help build that relationship. And as an educator, you might be able to develop a really positive, awesome relationship with grandma that comes and picks up the child up every day and spends 2, 3 hours with that little one until someone else gets home from work to pick them up. And so maybe you're not able to have as close of a relationship with the parents in that moment because of their work schedule, but you can help the interactions that are happening in the home environment with that relationship with grandma. So thinking about family engagement more broadly can help us be more inclusive and can build that partnership a lot better. I see.
I gotta stop muting myself.
There's no noise in the background, Erin. So I just want you to know we're not worried.
It's just instinct.
Right.
um, so we took some of the conversations that took place in the class learning community and plugged it into ChatGPT. I love AI for some things like this, being able to just build a word cloud. And so this was a word cloud that was created thinking about family engagement. And so I see some words in here that really support what we've been saying. So, for example, supporting, include, engage. What are some of the ones that you're drawn to when you look at this, Jahara?
I really like that combination of parent support, right? So really thinking about supporting the parent, supporting the families to be engaged. I know that as educators, we have limited time with families at times, but if we perceive our role as being able to support that family, of being able to connect with them, to engage them, and to inspire them. So if you think about class, right? Class is everywhere. In those interactions as we're having with families, as we're supporting them to have this critical role, to feel empowered. I see teachers really big there as well. And it makes me think about how families are really children's first teachers, and they're their lifelong teachers, right? Because families stay with each children across the rest of their lives. So the if we really want to be as educators really impactful in children's development, one of our key tools is families, because they're their first teachers and they're their lifelong teachers. So those are some things that just stand out to me here as I'm looking through this word crowd. But there's so many awesome things I see together, right? You thinking about us as a team. Um, Literacy opportunities. And I love when we think about some literacy opportunities and opening it up to families to help them realize that they can support children's literacy even if they don't know the language, right? So I know that I was working with a school down in Homestead that had 13 different dialects of Spanish being spoken. And the educators, they spoke Spanish, but they didn't understand many of these dialects. And a lot of these families felt that they could not support children's literacy because they didn't know how to read and write Spanish. And so we help support them in letting them understand that just talking to your child about what they're doing, narrating what they were saying in their own dialect, expressing what are some of those letters and what do they sound like, that was going to support children's literacy skills in the classroom as well. So those some of those literacy opportunities I think could be really empowering to all families for them to realize, hey, there's a lot that I can do, like tell stories or just narrate what they're doing, that I am supporting children's literacy.
I love that. And so, as we were preparing for this webinar, again, one of the things that you were talking about was a shift in perspective from so often it's family engagement. And you shifted our perspective a little bit. And so, what did you want us to think about instead of family engagement? And if we can go to the next slide here.
Yes. So as we are thinking about family engagement, at times family engagement seems to be a little one way, right? We are engaging families to do what we want them to do with our system. So we can go ahead and there we go. So when we talk about family partnerships, and it kind of helps us move a little bit into this idea of a partner. Here, it's a collaborative relationship. We are both equals in this relationship, and it is a two-way relationship, meaning we both communicate. So you're just not communicating to me about what can I do in my home to support children's education. I'm communicating to you, right? As a family, I have a voice of what is going on in the classroom. I have a voice in how my child is being supported. And in a family partnership, both families and educators, they work together with that shared goal of supporting children's development. So sometimes what I see in family engagement opportunities, and I'm sure many of you in the field have seen this, is that sometimes educators have awesome relationships with the families. They're friends. They're very nice to each other. We have grandma coming in and like cooking pieces of turkey, and another parent is bringing in some mashed potatoes and some rice and beans, and everybody is very nice. We all share moments in the classroom, and that is absolutely wonderful. That is a good foundation. But having a positive relationship and getting along with the family doesn't mean we're working towards a shared goal, right? And so when we we have those really good moments, but when we capitalize on that to form that partnership that has the shared goal of supporting the child's development, then that way we can bring much more intentionality to those relationships that children are going to benefit a lot more from. We could press next.
And I love that that brings us back to what we were saying earlier about uh shifting from being teacher to learner. So learning about these families so that you can be a more effective teacher. Start by understanding each family's unique strengths and practices.
Yes. So that really aligns with what you were mentioning earlier, Erin, that those funds of knowledge, really understanding. And let's go ahead and click all the way through the animations. There we go. So we want to know, who are these families? What is it that they are interested in? What are their goals for their kids, right? I know that when I work with a lot of Latino families, they're like, I want my child to be very educated. And when they refer to education, they're really talking about social emotional skills. They want them to be polite. They want them to be um, respectful of adults. And so we have to know who they are, and we have to know what are the things that they value. I know someone earlier in the chat was mentioning understanding some of their cultural traditions and bringing those into the classroom. We got to start by understanding what they are. What are their family traditions? I know that sometimes when I work with the Mexican community, it makes me think a lot of El Dia de los Muertos. I had a teacher that I was working with in Homestead that she brought in that celebration into her classroom, and she actually had children bring in a picture of a loved one that had passed. And even children that weren't from Mexican descent, they had an opportunity to learn about El Dia de los Muertos, and they had this opportunity to all participate in learning about that culture. And so once we figure out who they are, what they value, what are their goals for their kids, then we have to know what effective practices they are already doing. I know that at times when I've worked with educators that have been like, I'm not sure what this family is doing at home. And I say, that's why we need to open up the conversation, right? We need to open up to understand, what is it that the families are already doing with children? Is this a family that is working with the child so they can learn how to put on their shoes, right? And so they're giving children an opportunity to put on their shoes every single morning. And Erin, if you want to share your little one's story, I would love to hear it.
I was just giving that example is so we were talking about reframing our perspectives, and so there's kind of two stories real quick. One is a colleague of mine talks about when she was coaching, and she had this parent who couldn't come into the classroom for parent teacher conferences, and the educator thought, man, this parent just is checked out and isn't showing up, isn't available. And then the more they dug into it, it turns out that that parent actually was a street cart vendor, and that their prime selling time was during the parent teacher conferences. So ultimately, this parent was left with the tough decision. Do I go to this parent teacher conference and really engage with my child's learning and their schooling, or do I put dinner on the table? And that's such a tough choice. And so as we were thinking about reframing some of this, I mentioned that, my son, he's 4, almost 4. He could look like I'm just sending him off disheveled some days. Like I just don't care about, his presentation. When really he might have his shoes on the wrong feet because we're working on him putting his shoes on himself. And he, for some reason, loves putting them on the wrong feet every time. And rather than correcting him, being, that's so great that you did this yourself, encouraging him, and he's proud of the shoes being on the wrong feet. So just kind of thinking through a little bit, what might the backstory to some of these situations be? Asking questions and learning to really understand what's taking place and how you can maximize those strengths and lean into some areas and maybe make adjustments as needed to best support some of these families. So thinking about, I see the tip down there, making daily deposits. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yes. So I know some of us in the call, we might be familiar with banking time. Erin, I don't know if you want to talk banking time briefly.
So yeah, banking time it's a concept that our co-founders have been kind of presenting on for years. We do have a training on it, and it reminds me of a psychological principle I learned about many years ago, where it's for every one negative interaction, you need four positive interactions to offset it. Um, so you want to bank some of that in advance. You want to have those relationships really set up, have those foundations so that if there is a challenging conversation, a challenging behavior, a challenging situation of some sort, you've now established a foundational relationship to be able to work through that a little bit better. So we do have an offering with that that really helps support those intentional relationship building activities and interactions.
And banking time there's a lot of research on it, and it is associated with reducing a lot of the challenging behavior in the classroom. And banking time is usually implemented with between educators and children. But what I'm saying is let's make those deposits in the relationship. So kind of banking time, but with families. And so we want to have those positive interactions with families that we're making deposits of. So when it's time to make it's time to make a little bit of a withdrawal because maybe I'm sharing something that's not so great. And, your little one is biting in my classroom. Then I've made enough deposits for that family to still be able to be receptive. Um, I'm a godmother of children who have challenging behavior in the classroom. They're really excited little boys and have a really hard time meeting the expectations of sitting down and and just reading in the classroom or being able to fill out worksheets or things like that. And I know, and I have felt it, that I get a phone call and I see the teacher's name and I'm like, oh, what does she want now? Right? Because you know that a lot of times these interactions are only happening when there's bad things happening in the classroom. And so I don't want to hear about how my godson disrupted the class. What I want to hear about is how he did something right. And so when he has had educators that have made it intentional to tell me great things that he's doing, then I'm able to better support that educator when there is a challenging behavior in the classroom. So making those deposits in the relationship can really help support when it's time to have a challenging conversation. And I know that you all are thinking, well, when am I supposed to do that? Like there's a lot that I really need to do. And it can be very small, brief interactions that maybe happen during pickup or drop off. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to wait for a parent teacher conference to have some of these deposits done. We could say, hey, you know what? I saw Melissa today pass a piece of bread to her friend in mealtime that was still hungry. That was so kind of her. She's such a kind child. Like just little sentences like that. Or, today, did you know that the child asked me to go to the bathroom? That's awesome. He's just learning how to be potty trained and he was able to communicate that. That is so cool. So as we keep like a magnifying glass of trying to figure out when these positive things happened, we can communicate with those families at the end of the day. I know that I've shared this strategy with a lot of families that are working within like Head Start and early Head Start. And what they do is that they actually have a little calendar and are like, all right, this week I'm going to focus on building relationship with these four families. So when they do pick up and drop off, I'm going to focus on them. When you have 18 children in the classroom, you can't do that for every child every day, but you can do it for a couple of children. And then across the month, make sure that we've had those conversations with a couple of these families. The first week of school is a great time, that beginning time where you're kind of setting up the expectation of saying, I am here to actually see the positive things your child is doing, because what I'm interested in is building on your children's strength.
And that's fantastic. There's a great question that came in that I think really aligns with what we're saying about understanding families, which is building strong family relationships as a teacher requires an intentional effort to recognize and address personal biases, and then asking for some tips. So I have a couple kind of parts to this. One, please reach out to your dedicated points of contact here at Teachstone. We're happy to kind of talk through what some of those options are, especially in a more individualized way. But broader speaking, I think that this intentional attempt to understand the families and to shift perspectives is a fantastic start because that helps you to see families and individuals and not as part of a broader stereotype that you might have, part of a broader bias that you might have. So as I mentioned, maybe you're thinking, you know, uh, I was at a conference recently where one of the things that they put up on the screen was what are some of the common beliefs about kids and families who are in Head Start programs? And it was really interesting to see what some of those were because it was, I'm not going to repeat what some of them were because they weren't very PC, but some of the aspects were more, like that they're lazy families or they're uninvolved. And if you have biases like that, that's going to make it challenging to address some of the families where if you think they're not, um, they're not too busy for their child, but they're working 18-hour days. They're trying to put food on the table and they are doing everything they can to meet the needs of their children. That'll help work through some of these. I think that this um, cycle that you're going over here, Jahira, of understanding, planning, implementing, and then reflecting on that can help. Do you want to address a little bit about this? How you can make that intentional effort to recognize and address personal biases?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is admitting it to yourself. And it has happened to me, right? Where I've interacted with the family and I'm like, I don't like them very much. I don't feel like that is how my gut reaction. The first thing I need to do is understand that I'm a human being and I need to validate that feeling for myself. I need to recognize that I have that bias. And then when I recognize it, it really helps to talk to other people about it, right? Because if you talk to a co-teacher or you talk to a coach and you say, I feel this negative feeling when I interact with this family, what they can do is that they can help you have a more positive lens. And you can say, because I know that, because I feel that I have this negative perception, I'm going to be extra detailed and extra careful to catch them doing something well. The same thing we do with children. We know sometimes we have a bias when we have a child with challenging behavior. And although we all know that, yes, challenging behavior is a form of communication, in that moment, we might feel very negative. And that is okay. We need to recognize that. We need to take a deep breath and we have to figure out the way to cope with that feeling. And a lot of it is being much more mindful about finding those positive things. You know what? The fact that that parent is dropping off their child at school is sometimes they're catching buses, sometimes they're walking, and you know what? Who cares if this parent came in and is in their pajamas? They're making that extra effort to drop off this child at school. So as you start magnifying the positive things, you recognize your bias, magnifying the positive things and communicating it to that family, you'll realize that it will help you overcome some of those biases to be able to have that positive relationship with families. And sometimes when I work with educators, they're like, but it's so hard. And I tell them all the time, I recognize that it is challenging. It is challenging for us to always be that positivity. But if we truly care about these kids, that's the only way that we're going to make an impact. So going and recognizing our biases and then finding what those strengths are. And sometimes we're going to need an extra big magnifying glass because our biases might be very big. But as we start growing that magnifying glass, we'll be able to better understand those families and to be able to support them.
I love that. So as we then understand the families, we can then use that understanding to plan how we partner with families. So you just discussed this a bit as far as planning. So we're thinking about with that sort of what opportunities can we provide to build on families' strengths. So I love when you said catch them doing something well. Because how do we then see what those strengths are and then make that intentional effort to build on that? Just like what we want, we talk a lot about parallel process, right? Just consistency of these interactions. Just like as educators, as humans, we want others to be recognizing our strengths, not constantly saying, this is something you can improve on, this is something you can improve on, but rather, hey, I saw that awesome thing that you did, and I saw what the great result of that was. I see you. And we could do that same thing with families. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about just that planning these partnerships.
Yes. So a lot of the family opportunities that we currently have in the field, it's very much parents sit down, we are going to have a lecture and tell you what you need to do with your child. If we start shifting that to the partnerships, then we could see that we have to start thinking about what opportunities do we have that can actually allow us to learn from the family. Do our family engagement opportunities allow them to have a voice, to communicate what's important to them? How is it that we are planning events where it is prioritizing their values, their traditions, their what they are already invested in? And so as we think about planning those opportunities, it would be super awesome to have family voices there. I saw in the chat that someone mentioned that parent advisory council. That is awesome because they can be the ones to help plan things that are going to be relevant and important to the rest of the families. So if we could just go ahead and click through some of these questions here. So we have
When
to tailor our opportunities to meet the family's needs. If we know that most of our families are communicating to us and saying, hey, many of us are potty training and we're having a really hard time, then you know what? Let's plan an experience on what they're already doing to potty train and how we can build on what they're already doing to support children and being able to get to that milestone. Erin, I think you were going to add something. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine, you're fine. So I was just thinking about, so when we provide learning from them and building the trust, so it's not just like culturally and such, but also that dual learning of the child. Because I think about it with my son. My son is he's got some speech delays, he's at risk of some challenging behaviors and such. And the more that others understand some of like why he might act out, it's not necessarily because he's like trying to just hit another kid. It's he doesn't have the words and he has had to advocate for himself in other ways over time. So how do you then understand that and learn ways to better support this child? And so the more you can understand the family, make those connections, building that trust that you see their children as individuals and you see them as important, and then that helps build some of that trust so that the families feel like they can lean in a little bit more and share more of themselves, and they feel like they are part of the classroom community. And then we
And
can tailor opportunities. Sorry, go ahead.
And Erin, I love that you shared that, right? Because the more information we have as educators, the easier we can support their development and prevent some of those challenging behaviors. So if I'm your child's teacher and Erin and I have a very good relationship, we have had opportunities where Erin's shared with me and said, hey, this kiddo's at risk for some of this challenging stuff, and we're working with them, then you know what, as an educator, I could be like, you know what, let me get that little one and make sure that they're very close to me. Make sure to give them like some sensory experiences and things to do with their hands, while we are engaging in some of these classroom experiences. So the more we understand, the more not only we could plan experiences for families, but it could also make us better planners to prevent things that are happening in the classroom.
Which just makes everybody's day easier and better.
Everybody, including the
Everybody.
child,
Yes.
what we care about. Awesome. So let's go ahead and keep clicking through here. So then once we've made our plan, then we implement that plan and we use some of those effective strategies that you already know about interactions. You already know a little bit about the class where we're talking about this importance of connecting, right? The class is telling us how. It is how to engage, making sure that as we are supporting families, that they're meaningfully engaged in the work that we are doing with that family engagement opportunity, that they are inspired. We want families to walk out of our family engagement opportunities saying, I am motivated. I am invigorated to be able to support my child. I'm going to go home and do X, Y, and Z. And so then we implement the family engagement opportunities with the goal of having these awesome interactions that is going to do that.
And then it's the whole cycle, right? You can't just do it one time. You have to, after you've now implemented, you have to reflect on that information so that you can complete the cycle and go back through and see what worked and make adjustments as needed. So reflect on the implementation.
Let's go ahead and press through those animations. So we have to reflect on that experience, just like you said, Erin, right? We don't necessarily learn from the experiences we have. We learn about when we reflect on those experiences. And so what new strengths were we able to learn about families in this family engagement opportunity? What feedback did they provide? And I know sometimes like it's a lot to like put out a questionnaire or something like that. We can get feedback in many ways. It doesn't have to be so elaborate. It can literally just be asking the family, how is this helpful? What did this motivate you to do? How did this inspire you? Right? And give when we build that trust, the parents can say, actually, it didn't. There was a lot of theory and there wasn't a lot of like, what do I do when I go home right now? And that is okay for them to say that because that gives us an opportunity for us to reflect. And we can use those learnings to help us plan for these future opportunities that we have. So again, we are reflecting and then continuing that cycle to understand families and then engaging in this cyclical nature to plan these family engagement opportunities.
Okay. And so as we're thinking about that, so the next slide, real quick, we just wanted to think through just some basic things that you can be doing to be really having these effective interactions at home. So how can you connect with your kids? Just ask them questions on the way home. Ask them questions about their day. Not just yes or no questions, but what did you do today? And really engaging them a bit more. Consistent routines. Again, knowing what to anticipate, knowing how to be behaving in different situations, involving them. And so I know we're running low on time here, so I want to make sure that we get to the next part that is about, so how do we build a family engagement workshop? So we have a fantastic series that we have built. We have custom events. We have them for, you may have seen other sessions we've done where we have them for educators. We have them for coaches and administrators. We have them for observers. We also have custom events for families. And I'm excited that you're on this webinar with me, Jahira, because you had a large part in developing these, right? And so you're super excited about what some of these offerings are. We've already discussed every child's first teacher is their families, and they should have the best tools. We want to be empowering these families to be having these great interactions that are taking place in the classroom as well, to have those at home and to turn those everyday moments into opportunities for growth and development. At Teachstone, we're then happy to help you build and plan and organize an event without you having all those headaches. We have a fantastic team here who will do that part for you and help build the event. So if we can go to the next slide, we're just going to show what some of the sessions are that we have for families. And if you could talk through this a little bit, because I know I love seeing your face light up when we talk about this.
Yes. And so we know that we want to find meaningful ways to engage our families. And we know that educators have a lot on their plate. And even if they're doing all these great things of making these positive deposits, it's helpful for families themselves to have their own resources. And so these custom events are really designed for families. And one of the things that I love about them is that when we developed them, we were really thinking about what is it that families are already doing. You already have to have a morning routine with your child. They got to wake up in the morning. You got to get them to school. So rather than telling families, oh, build this elaborate play experience and sit down with your kid for the 2 hours while you would play, that's lovely if you're able to do that. But a lot of our families, we know that they're very restricted on time. They have a very strict work schedule. And so since you're already doing some of these things, you're already waking your child up in the morning, let's do it in a positive note. Let's include some of these interactions in there. You're already driving your child to school or commuting somehow. And so you're already either on a bus or you're walking. And so how can we make those moments that are actually supporting children's development? And one of the things that I love about this series is that it gives them very, very practical, real examples of what they can do. Not only does it give them the strategy, but it shows them examples of families that have implemented this. And we've gotten some quotes from them of how they've done this. And we've put that into our sessions. So I really, really hope that you all have an opportunity to invite your families to do some of these custom events. because they are really tailored to the families, capitalizing on the strengths. There's a lot of interactive opportunities as part of this session that the facilitators have, where we have the questions up there. We talk about some of the challenges and idea to overcome some of these challenges to have these great interactions. So absolutely a great series, and we really hope that your families are able to enjoy them.
And I love how you talk about how it's not like this, well, everybody needs to do X, Y, Z. It's not like, well, if you're going to be having a morning routine, everybody needs to sit down at the table for breakfast for 30 minutes and have a conversation together. But rather, how can you take the routine that you already have and enhance it? So I love that because it's just so much more practical. I know I have 3 kids, 4 and under. And if you said that I had to get them sitting down for breakfast all together and have just, family breakfast time every day, that would be such a challenge. But having more practical solutions would be very, very welcome. And so I know that Isabella just put in the chat the menu of offerings. And so looking at this kind of sample, what we're looking at here is that our custom events, as I mentioned, we have some for families. We also have some for educators, for observers, coaches, etc. So you can build, it could be a one-off session, a one-off, we just really want to focus on this particular topic. It could be an ongoing lunch and learn or an ongoing every month when you have your family engagement you do a session. And so this is just to show that it can be built in different ways. Also alongside, maybe you have an educator PD day and families are all out that day as well, since it's an educator PD day. You want to have a dual session. You want to have one that's going for educators, one that's going for families that can be done simultaneously. They could be in English and in Spanish. So we have a lot of great options here. Definitely reach out to your direct point of contact here at Teachstone so we can talk through what some of that might look like. Great things that you receive as part of it. So reports not only on attendance, but also on satisfaction. Did the participants feel satisfied with the sessions and their learnings? Handouts, access to the recordings for 6 months. I love that because while yes, it's a live facilitated session, so you get so much out of it if you're able to attend live. We've been discussing this whole time about how families might not have that time. And so if they have access, maybe they want to revisit some of the topics. They have that access here. Providing session feedback. We do co-branding, so we support with any of the materials you want to share out to families about the event that you're going to be putting on. And then we provide event support, so technical support. We're live in the platform, making sure that everything's going off without a hitch. We know that this helps meet various program requirements. So Jahira, if you want to talk about this a little bit, some of the family engagement requirements.
So we know that in Head Start, it's a 2-generational program. There is very big intentionality in being able to support families. And these custom events tailored for families can really give them a lot of practical things that could support some of those interactions and support that team building. We also have the CCDBG requirements that we know are really important. I'm not sure if someone else wants to talk a little bit about CCDBG or you want me to do it. What do you guys prefer?
One thing that Megan just called out that we totally missed is that these sessions are 45 minutes. So they are bite-sized learning opportunities. That's why I mentioned they could be a lunch and learn, it could be a one-off session, it could be during your your family engagement time. So there's really, these are super flexible and able to adjust to fit in, even if it's just a little bit of time that you have.
And Erin, I want to add to that we do it remotely, right? So parents can do it from their phones. They can
Yes.
do it from their computers. They can do it from their iPads. So it is very short and they don't have to think about trying to get to school. We know a lot of families have issues with transportation. Sometimes the bus routes don't run as late and it can be really challenging to get there. It could take a big amount of time. So they can do it virtually and they have access to the information afterwards to review. So they have those handouts as well. And if we as a program can work on like, oh, well, we know that, the family is working on providing choices during that morning routine. Oh, okay, I'm going to work on providing choices here and make that child a lot more capable and form that bridge I think would be really, really helpful.
Awesome. And so pricing wise, also very affordable. These sessions, they're very engaging, but they also have large attendee participant quantities that we can have. So you can have more than 300 attendees. We have standard pricing for up to 300. And then we have non-standard pricing if you have more than 300, if you serve a larger community, if you have a lot of family engagement folks who are just really excited to attend, which would be fantastic. And so we can kind of walk through that with you. So please definitely reach out with any sort of questions, any sort of feedback. And I know we do have one question that's waiting for us. Feel free to add any additional questions if y'all have them. I know we have 1 minute left here. Can we implement these internationally? Are they available in Turkish if we would like to enroll? So can we implement these internationally? Yes, absolutely. Are they available in Turkish? They are available in English and in Spanish. What I have done is, if you have like a translator, you could provide a translator to help support. That's a sort of one-off type situation that you would definitely want to reach out and connect with us to see how we can best support your individual unique needs.
That was a great question and a great presentation. The recording, I'm seeing that question being asked in the chat a little bit. Recording will be posted to YouTube, but it will also be sent to you. So if you've registered, whatever email you used to be here today, we'll receive the recording probably tomorrow. We are at the end of our time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. I know for some of you, it was probably pretty early, so we appreciate you being here. Seeing if you need to connect with our panelists, Megan dropped a link to Erin's LinkedIn in the comments, and then I've dropped the link to how you can reach out to contact a rep to talk about getting started with a custom event for families, or if you're interested in any other kind of custom event, we can do that as well. Jahira, Erin, anything else to add before we go?
No, and Jahira's LinkedIn is also in the chat.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I was trying to find it. I just want to thank everyone for participating in this session. And I hope that you're walking out of this session really thinking about shifting to creating those family partnerships and that two-way street. And here at Teachstone, we really want to be able to support you with doing that.
And we have a poll just before you go, if you could let us know what your role is and what you thought. Would love to hear from you. So yes, before you sign off, definitely answer the question in the poll, and then we hope to see you next time on our next event. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, it's not too late to answer that poll. We've got a good amount of you. Oh, okay. Megan's reminding me, registration is still open for Interact, which is our live conference that we hold once a year, and that is going to be in New Orleans this year. So we're super excited in April. She just dropped the link to that in the chat as well. I will likely be there. I'm not sure if Erin and Jahira will be there yet, but
I think we're both there presenting.
okay, awesome. So you'll be able to meet them in person, and this is a great event for educators and coaches, administrators to connect with other people in the field and hear about how interactions are transforming schools everywhere. And scholarship opportunities are available that until Friday. So if you go online at the link posted in the chat, it will be open until Friday. You can apply, and that covers all kinds of stuff. So we hope to see you there, and definitely pass that along to your team or team leader.
Thank you all so much. It's been wonderful this morning. And hope to hear from y'all with lots of questions and interest and feedback.
Thank you, everyone.